Good morning and welcome to our first episode of UFL Central, our new show covering the United Football League. It's been a little while since we've covered the league, via a video or audio podcast. So we're back with some more spring football coverage that is not indoors for a change. So I know if you watch our Saturday show, you see both me and TJ on that show, but this is going to have a little bit different flavor, completely focused on the UFL. The new iteration of the league and how it's kind of going in a new direction for 2026. Before we get into that, I'm going to play a quick intro video, introduce you to Travis if you have not already met him, and we'll get into the show. Always gets me woken up first thing in the morning. So Travis, I know it's been a long time since you've been on one of these shows, man. How's it been? How have you been? What's it feel like to be back on ShadySports and how are things going for you, man?
Well, it's been good. Bought a house, bought a car, a lot of big life stuff going on. That's what happens whenever you're in your early 20s and stuff. So a lot of stuff going on. A lot of stuff with work going on and everything, but I'm happy to be back because it has been, I guess, a year now since I've covered any sports with you guys. As some of you know, me and Sam started off talking about the USFL years ago and then transitioned to the XFL, and then that led to the UFL talk and stuff as well. So I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, way back in the FCF days when that's kind of how you and I connected in the first place. It's kind of crazy to think about that all the way, back in like 2021 now.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sorry about that. And then TJ, man, how you doing? I know I saw you just yesterday morning, but glad to be back on another show with you as well, man.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to be a part of this show and get to talk some outdoor alternative football instead of indoor. And fun fact about the FCF, that was actually the first game my newborn son watched with me. He'll probably never remember because he was like a few days old, but I remember.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that league, and honestly, I wish it would come back and or some league would adopt some of the things they did because it was so much fun to watch and kind of follow along with. But we're not here to talk about the FCF. We are here to talk about the UFL. So we'll go ahead and get into that. The first thing that I wanted to discuss is given, obviously, if you're watching this, you're probably a UFL fan. You've probably seen all the logos, seen all the teams, but we're going to kind of do a full breakdown as if we haven't had an episode because we haven't. So we're going to go ahead and go through the teams, the new logos, the relocations, the coaches that have been hired, and then we'll kind of go briefly through the rosters and the schedule as well. You're kind of get a whole package. So if you haven't been following along with the UFL, this will be the perfect episode for you to watch, where we'll kind of get you up to speed on everything you need to know for the season coming up very quick. I think it's 45 days if I saw the number right the other day. So it's coming up very, very quickly. But the first thing we wanted to get to was the teams and some of these logo changes or relocations. So obviously we had three teams that went away, or I guess, three teams that went away, four teams technically, if you look at Houston, that went back to the Gamblers from the Roughnecks. Then we also gained the Louisville Kings, the Orlando Storm, and the Columbus Aviators. Birmingham Stallions remain completely unfazed. St. Louis Battlehawks, DC Defenders as well. The Renegades go back to Dallas after previously being Arlington. So give me some of your thoughts on these moves by the league to move these teams around, and what do you guys think about the new markets, since we haven't had a chance to really discuss that on camera as of yet? Let's go to Travis first on this one.
Well, first things first, I'm happy that they were able to disband the Memphis Showboats, because that was obviously a struggling market in terms of attendance. They had the lowest attendance, every year of their existence and stuff in the league. So I'm happy to get out of that market. I think Louisville's a lot better market. I think they're going to appreciate the pro football team there a lot more. In terms of the Louisville logo, I think it looks pretty cool. I think their jerseys are going to look pretty cool because I think their color scheme's nice. And we've already seen looks of their helmets and stuff. And I think it's a good rebranding for, for that area. And I think they got, I mean, not to spoil too much, but I think like their roster moving forward. And I think they have a lot of potential in that roster.
Absolutely. Sorry about the double talk there. I was trying to get this shared out while we're going. TJ, what are your thoughts on some of these brands, some of the markets they chose?
Yeah, I like them a lot as well. I love that they made an effort to go back to Orlando. I know they tried it a few years ago, technically, but I feel like this year is going to be a lot better for them. I like how they kept with, you can say, close alternative football ties with their general logo and color scheme. Louisville, I think is awesome. Like Travis said, man, I think they're really gonna like having a pro team, and they're really gonna. I think that's going to be a really good follow. They're going to have a good following rather. And for Houston, I'm glad that they went back to the Gamblers because I mean that's just the better alternative. I never knew why they stuck with Roughnecks to begin with, so happy they went back to that.
Interesting point there, TJ. I think you were probably in the minority when you said that about the Gamblers, because I think most people really wanted that Roughnecks brand to stay. But there's definitely some USFL fans out there that were not happy about the Gambler brand going away, and now not only is it back, but we have Kevin Sumlin back. So let's start right there. Travis. Were you surprised to see Kevin Sumlin return?
Surprised and not surprised at the same time. It's a person who's been a head coach before, so getting that experience is very useful because, I mean, we talked about Houston's coaching situation last year, and we thought there was some improvements that could be had. So I do like them going out and getting him back. He's already obviously familiar with that market, familiar with this league. So I think it's a good hire for them.
I agree. It's an interesting hire, obviously, because he was the head coach of the Gamblers in 2022 before joining Maryland as, I believe, their co-offensive coordinator and tight ends coach, if I remember correctly. And then he returns to the league in 2026 as the head coach of the Gamblers as they return to the league. So kind of an interesting situation there. I think everybody's probably glad to see Curtis Johnson leaving ultimately. It is a little bit of an odd choice to go from Curtis Johnson back to Sumlin. But as we kind of go through some more of these coaching staffs, you'll kind of see a theme that a lot of these 2022, 2023 coaches are coming back to the UFL now. So TJ, what were your thoughts immediately when you saw the return of Sumlin, and then as well as the hire of Ted Ginn Jr. and Chris Redmond for Louisville?
Yeah, I wasn't too surprised. Again, the coaching situation in Houston the past, couple of years has been kind of iffy. But and I think 2022 was Houston's best year, I think, so far in league play with Sumlin as the head coach.
I think it was actually last season with Curtis Johnson when they went 5-5. I need to look that up though.
Either way, I knew that they were pretty competitive with him. So the fact that he's coming back now after spending a few years in college, I think that's going to be a good hire for them. And for Ted Ginn Jr., man, I remember watching him play. I think he's going to bring a lot of intensity. I know he's also been involved, in some arena and indoor football stuff over the years since retirement as well. So it kind of fits his portfolio to get involved, and I think he's going to be overall a good fit there as head coach for them. And then Chris Redmond, that's a name blast from the past. Way back from the early 2000s. Did did win a Super Bowl as a backup with the Ravens. So the fact that he's coming back to Louisville is a little bit of It feels right. I'll put it that way. It feels right. It did surprise me a little bit, but with the way the league seems to be going with Rapoli as, now kind of being in charge and stuff, I'm not. It's makes sense that he got the opportunity because it seems like they're trying to go from former players that never really got a shot in the NFL to let's give them a shot here in the UFL.
That makes perfect sense. And obviously his ties to Louisville are very extensive. We could go over that in detail, given the fact that he spent his entire college career there. He lives there, all that fun stuff. So he has extensive ties to the region, which I think will be big when it comes to fan support of the new team. Travis, you didn't get a chance to give your opinion on the Redmond hire, the as well as the Ginn hire, but I also want to throw another name at you, AJ McCarron. What did you think about AJ McCarron's hire, and then also the move to bring in Ted Ginn Jr. and Chris Redmond?
Yeah, so I mean, Ted Ginn Jr., he was a fantastic player, and I also remember watching him. And he obviously has deep ties to that Columbus area, played at Ohio State. So I think regionally it's a great hire. Obviously, you're getting a guy who's never been a head coach before, so you never know exactly what to expect. But I hope he can blossom into this role. And same way with Redmond, I believe. Has he ever been a head coach before? I do not think so. So again, they're really leaning on the connection to the area. Like you said, spent all of his time there in Louisville and stuff. Ted Ginn Jr. from Ohio State. They're really leaning into people specific for those markets. And another name to go along with that is AJ McCarron going to the Birmingham Stallions. Strong Alabama ties. I think it's crazy just because a couple years ago he was playing in this league. So it's very interesting that he's going to be coaching against people that he played with. So I think that's very interesting. But I mean, as a person, I really like AJ McCarron. I think he is a leader of men, and I think we saw that whenever he played, especially whenever he was starting for St. Louis. I think he's a good leader. So I'm excited to see how he leads that group. I'm excited to see what his offense looks like. I heard him talk about it a little bit, and he kind of was saying in terms of formation and personnel, they're going to be doing a lot of things. They're going to be running the ball, but they're also going to be spreading it out. So I'm interested to see kind of his multiple type offense. And, I don't think all of his coordinators or anything are announced yet. I think just his DC, correct? I'm not sure how many of their coaches have been announced yet, but I'm excited to see who else he gets on his staff and, see what he can do with it.
Brent Thomas checking in from Louisiana. Thanks for watching, Brent. We appreciate you watching and commenting. Would love to hear your thoughts on some of these coaching hires if you want to give your 2 cents as well. So I like the Chris Redmond hire. I know a lot of people, when they first heard it, they're like, wow, this guy hasn't coached. Dear Lord. So he hasn't coached at a high level. So, what's he going to be able to do as a head coach? But then he went out and immediately started getting some very high level coordinators, which I felt that kind of made me feel a little bit better about the move. But then he also has a background that a lot of people were not really giving him credit for in terms of the indoor football stuff, where he was, the team president of the Louisville Extreme for a season. So he kind of has a taste of alternative football as well. Going out and getting the staff that he's got, or at least rumored to get, that was on UFL analyst page, and I can pull that up here in a second. A lot of ties to that Baltimore Ravens team where they won a Super Bowl. So it's going to be a lot of names that people recognize. Jamie Sharper's coming back to coaching in the UFL now. He was with the XFL in 2023. And then he gets to return and then also reunite with the teammate he once won a Super Bowl with. So I thought that was a really cool move. It was one of the moves that I thought made a lot of sense on the surface, but you never know how these coaching staffs get assembled. And then some of the moves that AJ McCarron's made for his staff in terms of bringing in, I think it's TJ Siskey, if I remember correctly, as his offensive coordinator. That's an interesting move as well. So it'll be fun to watch how some of these staffs shake out. But I wanted to back up a couple steps. So we talked about, AJ McCarron. We talked about Ted Ginn Jr. We talked about some of the younger coaches as well as Sumlin returning. What we haven't talked about is the interesting hire where they went kind of outside the box in terms of who they were hiring in 2026, and they went and got Rick Neuheisel to replace Bob Stoops, who opted to retire for 2026. So what are you guys' takes on the hire of Rick Neuheisel, who spent some time in the AAF in 2019? Let's go to TJ first on this one.
I mean, really, compared to the rest of the coaches, it's kind of a weird hire, but at the same time, like you said, he has been around alternative football, and he does bring a veteran presence to coaching. It almost makes me feel like they wanted to replace Stoops with kind of a similar figure like himself initially, and then after the fact, then they really went the rest of the way with young coaches. But I don't hate it. It did kind of surprise me considering how when you look at the rest of the head coaches, though. But I mean, he's been around for a long time, in both the college and the NFL, and I think he's going to bring a lot of great experience to the team. He kind of already puts them probably in playoff contention as well. At least just by looks, just because of his resume as well.
Fair point. Travis, what do you think about that? And what about TJ's point there that they could immediately be a playoff contender because of his experience?
I mean, I definitely understand why TJ would say that. And I think exactly what he said in terms of Bob Stoops retired, and they got a guy pretty much like Bob Stoops that has, the same amount of experience, been around the game forever. I definitely understand it. And then, like we said, they lean more towards into the specific markets right after that. And, they have a quarterback in Luis Perez who's been in the spring game forever now. And, I see them, a little hint to my power rankings later on, I see them as a possible playoff contender right now also.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think you'd be foolish not to. Just to kind of throw some stats out there. In 13 seasons as a head coach, Rick Neuheisel has a total of 4 losing seasons. He was in a playoff or a bowl game in nearly every season during his college career. And then when he was with Arizona in 2019 during the AAF, he was 5-3 as well. So pretty solid track record there of a lot of winning, I would say. And then what I liked about him that I thought was kind of cool, although I don't know how much it's really going to affect some of the fans and their support of the team, is the fact that he once played in the USFL. He actually bypassed the NFL draft to go into the USFL and played 2 seasons with the San Antonio Gunslingers. So that's kind of like his tie to Texas, which I thought was kind of cool. But there was also a little bit of a tidbit that I found that actually, if it weren't for a chance encounter in a airport in Dallas, he would have probably never become a head coach in the first place. That's how he ended up in Colorado as the offensive coordinator, and then later took over as the head coach, which catapulted him to where he's at now. So kind of interesting how everything sort of comes full circle, although in a very small way. A couple comments I wanted to get to here. COJ85 says hello, and then are you guys talking about the NFL? No, we are actually talking about the UFL, the United Football League. So if you're a fan of spring football like we are, definitely stick around. If you're not aware of the UFL, we can teach you what you need to know to enjoy the games coming up very quickly here in March. And we're talking about currently the coaches hired. So I'm going to pull up a graphic. Here are the entire coaching, all the head coaches hired. So we've talked about Neuheisel, we've talked about Sumlin, McCarron, Redmond, Ginn. We have not talked about Ricky Prohl, the other first-time head coach on this list. Let's go to Travis first on this one. What did you think when they hired Ricky Prohl?
I like the hire a lot. It's a promotion for him because he spent the past couple years as their wide receivers coach. So he's already familiar with, the St. Louis team that they're able to keep some pieces of the St. Louis team together. And he's already familiar with them. I've listened to a lot of him talking during the draft and stuff. And I think he seems very knowledgeable, and I think he seems like a good leader. He seems very excited. I love his offensive coordinator that he picked up, AJ Smith. He's been an offensive coordinator in the league for a couple years now, and I think he always runs a very good offense. And I actually thought he was a candidate for a head coaching job this cycle, but he ends up going back to OC under Ricky Prohl. But all in all, I really like it. I think it's good for the league in terms of it shows that, you can go from a positions coach or a coordinator coach to being a head coach in this league. So all in all, I like it a lot. And then just finding the, experienced offensive coordinator in AJ Smith is just another bonus.
Agreed. I think that was a big hire for him as well. I real quick before I hand this over to TJ, I really like this hire. I think there were probably 2 hires in this cycle that I felt were can't miss, make the utmost sense when you brought these guys in, and it was Shannon Harris and Ricky Prohl. And the reason I don't include Anthony Becht in that before anybody gets upset is because I didn't like that they moved him to Orlando. I thought if you keep Anthony Becht on these coaching staffs, you keep him in St. Louis where he's had a lot of success. Fans love him. He's interacted with that St. Louis fan base for years now. He was the only constant from these head coaching, changes. So to me, it would have made sense to leave him in St. Louis. But if you were going to move him out, what better way to do it than have a guy who not only coached for the Battlehawks, but also won a Super Bowl in St. Louis and is one of the players that helped coin the term "the greatest show on turf." Which, by the way, a spoiler alert, I expect to see a lot of that style of offense in 2026. A lot of spread it out, pound the rock when the defense is vulnerable in the middle. So I think St. Louis is going to be a high-flying offense. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and it's going to remind St. Louis Battlehawks fans what it felt like in the early 2000s when their team was dominant in the NFL and won the last professional football championship for the city of St. Louis. So I think that was a home run hire. But TJ, I wanted to get your thoughts on Ricky Prohl, and then we'll also ask you about the other 2 coaches in Shannon Harris and Anthony Becht.
Well, don't forget Ricky Prohl, man. He also came out of retirement, partial retirement, and won a ring with the Indianapolis Colts as well. So the guy's just a winner, right?
If I remember correctly during my research, he's been to 5 Super Bowls and won 2, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a consummate winner. Like you said, he has obvious ties, winning a championship with the St. Louis Rams. He's another guy who's been around for a while, and I like the fact that they kind of kept it in house because I thought they should have kept Coach Becht there as well. But like you said, if they were going to replace him, at least they did it in house with someone with local ties, so they were keeping that local tie feel alive for majority, if not all, of the head coaches. For Anthony Becht, I'm not gonna lie, man. I kind of want to become a little bit of an Orlando fan this year because I do like him as a head coach. I think he's going to do really well down there. They said in the announcement that part of the reason of moving him there was because he did such a good job in St. Louis that they wanted him to help jumpstart the Orlando franchise down there. So, whether that was a little bit of smoke and mirrors or not, I'm going to buy into it because I really do like Becht as a head coach. And I think the Orlando Storm are probably going to be one of the better teams this year. Not to get into rankings too early, but yeah, I really like that move by the UFL to put him in Orlando, and then Shannon Harris. Hey, coming back. As the defending champs, let's see how they do. I think they're going to be another tough out this year as well. I think he's still going to have that chip on his shoulder, even though Coach Holtz is out.
Absolutely. Travis, what are your thoughts on Shannon Harris returning and then also Anthony Becht?
I mean, I think it's great for the league to have both of them return. They're both great ambassadors and role models for the league. I'm really happy as a DC fan that Shannon Harris is back because I think he's a great coach and a great motivator. Like you guys said, it kind of was a little puzzling to move back to Orlando. just because he's had so much success with St. Louis. But the only way that they fix that is by what Sam said, is by making a great hire for St. Louis to be his replacement. That's the only reason I think that that's made it justified. And plus, Anthony Beck does have ties to the Orlando area. But I think it's great for the league that both of them are returning. Both of them are, some of the, aside from Skip Holtz, the most winning coaches in the UFL historically. So I think both of their teams that they're going to be coaching this year are going to be competing for titles.
Agreed. Now, obviously, I want to preface some of what I'm about to say by saying there were some other coaches that really deserve to stay with the league, in my opinion. Skip Holtz being the top of that list. If you look at it, his record cannot be argued against. I understand why he moved on. I understand why the league may have wanted to move on, but to me, that was another move that didn't make a lot of sense when you ultimately decided who stayed and who left. Sorry. But at the end of the day, if you were going to keep anybody out of the previous coaches, I think, like you said, Shannon Harris and Anthony Becht were two of the better decisions, right? Both of them had great seasons last year. Anthony Becht, he should have been to the playoffs 3 straight seasons with St. Louis. That first season he had kind of a rough situation there where he was 7-3 and still managed to miss the playoffs to a team that was not as good, to be honest. So realistically a great coach. And I do like the thought that they are kind of putting someone established in Orlando where they've struggled to gain a foothold, in multiple leagues over the years. So, I mean, maybe that's not the worst idea. Plus, he did play for the Buccaneers for a few seasons. And to my understanding, he lives in Florida. So, maybe that's the thought process there where he can be in the market year round and kind of build out that fan base. Because obviously in my opinion, he's probably the most entertaining coach in the UFL. His personality is awesome. And in fact, he reminds me a lot of Dan Campbell in Detroit, and hopefully eventually we see Becht get some NFL interest to be a coach at that level eventually someday.
Side note, he did have a interview for the West Virginia head coaching job. So he's gotten interest from elsewhere already. There
you go, his alma mater. So it would make a lot of sense for him to return there. And honestly, I think that he hit the job he has done as a first-time head coach in the XFL, and then for the 3 seasons up to this point, has been extremely impressive. When he was first hired, he was like the least experienced coach on the XFL list. He had 1 season of AAF coaching experience as a tight end coach. He gets hired as a head coach. I was kind of iffy on it at the time, and he's literally won 7 or more games in every season so far. So, it's kind of cool to see that. And you kind of have to wonder if, maybe Ricky Prohl has some of that same success in St. Louis. So definitely interested to see that. But we're going to take a quick break, run obligatory sponsorship commercials, and then we'll be right back to do a brief roster breakdown, and then we'll get into the schedule as well. So give us your thoughts on the head coaches, the logos, the rosters, anything you guys want to talk about. Let's get it in the chat. Would love to see some more engagement from you guys.
The mountains you climb, maybe stairs. The records you set, maybe personal. The fans you inspire, maybe family. No lights, no camera, just action. You don't have to be a pro. You just need HoneyStinger.
How many times a week?
Like, three, four times, maybe.
I'm gonna pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me. It's so easy. Get out your own way. It's just so easy.
always love that commercial, and I swear every time I watch it, I want to go get some chocolate milk and donuts because he looks really excited about that. So we're going to go ahead and get into some of these rosters. Also, obviously, shout out to all the sponsors that make all of this possible. If you want to support Shady Sports Network, hit up the links in the description, use our discount codes. We get a kickback for all of that. So really appreciate any and all support of any of those sponsors. But we'll go ahead and get into the rosters, and we're going to start with the St. Louis Battlehawks. So Travis, I know that you are not able to kind of pull up the roster in front of you, but what did you like about what the Battlehawks drafted and what they did not draft? Let's put it that way.
I mean, first off, Ricky Prohl being their wide receiver coach, they ended up with some of the regional allocations and some of the players that they were just able to retain before the draft, but they kept a lot of their wide receivers there in Hakeem Butler, Ja'Cory Pearson, Frank Darby, Blake Jackson, Gary Jennings. They kept, really all of their major role players in that wide receiver room. And I think that's going to help this offense tremendously. I like some of the pieces they have on defense as well. And particularly, I believe they have Carlos Davis, and former Steeler, shout out. But I think he's a great defensive lineman. He's been playing great for the Stallions for years now. So I think that's a great pickup on the interior D-line for them. And then they also got Travis Feeney back, Mike Rose back, and then a couple pieces in their secondary that I like. Luke Barku, he spent some time with the Steelers as well. But if we remember before that, he was a terrific player on the San Antonio Brahmas. And that's what propelled him to get another opportunity in the NFL because he had some remarkable stat in terms of I think he only allowed 50 receiving yards all year, something like that, whenever he was with the Brahmas. And then that led to him going with the Steelers and then going to a couple other places as well. I think he spent some time on the Jets, but Luke Barku as, possible their CB number 1 is a great addition.
TJ, what are your thoughts on the Battlehawks? Who sticks out to you?
A couple other players that I like is Jonathan Sutherland, linebacker, played at Penn State. Trying to look. I had a list typed out, but for some reason it doesn't want to open now, so that's my luck. So apologize for that. What else did I see?
What do you think about the quarterback room? Let me ask you that. So they've got Brandon Silvers. Now I'm blanking. Michael Pratt and Ben Woolridge at quarterback. What do you think about that group?
I like it. I think there's going to be some competition, but I think Silvers is going to win it, honestly.
I was wondering the same thing, actually. There's not a lot of experience in that room. And Travis, I was kind of curious about your thought on that one as well. Who do you think ends up winning the position for them?
It wouldn't surprise me if Silvers starts off the year because he's already spent time. And I'm assuming Ricky Prohl is going to have a similar system. It is going to be more of it's going to be an A.J. Smith offense, which he also spent time with whenever Brandon Silvers was in Houston. So I think Silvers is going to win the job early, but I think, and I'm hoping that by the end of the season, it's the Michael Pratt show and he ends up, playing some good football. He had a lot of highlights in Tulane, got drafted in the 7th round by the Packers, I believe, made some plays in the preseason. Very surprised he's actually in this league because I thought he would be on an NFL roster right now.
That's fair. That's fair. Honestly, he had an impressive career in college, and honestly, he makes a lot of sense for the type of guy who could come in the league, light it up for 1 year, and then go back to the NFL, and we'll never see him in spring football again. Ben Woolridge is a guy who intrigues me because he was a 1-year starter in college, despite spending 6 years in school. Spent time with 2 really good programs, yet only started, like I said, the 1 season right there at the end, but he flashed. When he started, he played pretty well. Completed over 66% of his passes. But that was like his best season of his entire career. And you just don't really know what he gets. But in a league like the UFL, that's the type of guy you want to take a chance on, because he could stick here and develop and, get the playing time that he did not get in college, and then potentially make himself, an NFL backup, or at the very, very least, going forward. So both very young quarterbacks behind Silver. So I really like that construction. But what I really, really like about this team, and one I wanted to get into with you guys a little bit, which obviously don't want to spend a ton of time just on St. Louis, but Travis, you hit the nail on the head with Carlos Davis. So this defense was already impressive last year, and like you said, they kept a lot of the key guys. Pita's back, Mike Rose, Travis Feeney. But then they also brought in some, in my opinion, two of the best safeties from the UFL previously, Michael Oyemudie and then AJ Thomas from Birmingham, which I think are probably, honestly, the best pairing of safeties I've seen in the league in a while, because, Michael, great coverage type safety. AJ, big dude, can come down, support the run, do a lot of things. So I like that group. And then also their offensive line's very strong. What I thought was interesting as well is they only drafted one tight end. So obviously they have Hakeem Butler back, but only drafting one true tight end kind of indicates to me this is going to be, an AJ Smith offense where they're spreading everybody out. They're going to try and gash them up the middle occasionally with the run. They have 4 different running backs, 3 of which are 216 pounds or more. So, there's going to be some power run game mixed in, but I'm excited. I think the Battlehawks have a great roster. Their defense is stacked. TJ, before we move on, any other players that you wanted to name that stuck out to you?
I think you mentioned it. There we go. Yeah. I think you mentioned him before while I was pulling up my list finally. Hakeem Butler, wide receiver, tall, speedy, physical, out of Iowa State. So, he can do some hand checking. I look forward to seeing what he can do. From the Baltimore area, 29, so a little bit older, but, could still, get some looks and have a shot at getting back into the NFL for a couple of years if he's able to ball out this season. That's
fair. And actually, Butler's the one player that, with him on the roster, you can play him as a tight end, you can play him as a wide receiver. So definitely a guy who could kind of alleviate some of those concerns at tight end for sure. Let's move on to the Orlando Storm. Kind of look at this team that Becht built. He's given, one of the things that we have not discussed yet is with the new iteration of the UFL, they've kind of gone away from the single GM model. So these coaches are acting as their kind of final personnel say. So they get to pick these rosters themselves, which is going to be a unique dynamic for a guy like Anthony Becht, who was paired with a really good GM in Dave Bowler in St. Louis. Dave Bowler's no longer with the league, so now Becht gets to pick his own players. And he built a pretty interesting roster that we're going to get into a little bit here. Travis, are there any players here on this roster that you liked that stuck out to you?
I mean, you're going to be proud of me, Sam, because I was diving deep for this because I saw some ELF footage, and Aaron Cruikshank stood out to me. I watched a couple of his games following him in that league. And, I mean, we've talked about it before, years prior with Kavontae Turpin. And Eric Cruikshank is the definition of lightning in a bottle. And he's, that person that just gives him the ball in space, and he's going to make people miss, and he's going to go down the sideline. So, I mean, I think Anthony Becht with Aaron Cruikshank is going to be a great pairing. It's actually pretty interesting because they have 2 guys like that. They have Aaron Cruikshank, and they also got Chris Rowland from DC. So they kind of have 2 guys who fit that same mold. And I think Anthony Becht's going to, utilize them very well and try to give them the ball in any way. And then you add in guys like D. Anderson, who's a 6'6" receiver, a bigger body guy to be on the outside. I think this is exactly what Anthony Becht wants. I believe he talked about before whenever he was with the Battlehawks. You got to build a basketball team. You need people with different sizes, different skill sets and everything, and that's exactly what he's done. He's got multiple size receivers and guys who do different things well, and I think he's building a good offense down there in Orlando.
Absolutely. Good luck to any other team in the red zone. You mentioned D. Anderson, who's 6'5", 225. They also have a 6'7", 255-pound tight end in Cole Taylor. And then also Steven Stellanos, 6'5", 255, and then a couple other receivers that are over 6 foot as well. So pretty solid receiver group and a lot of size there. But then they also have, like you said, Cruikshank, very electric player, and Chris Rowland, one of the most dangerous players in the UFL over the past couple seasons. TJ, I wanted to ask you about this roster, but then I also wanted to ask you your opinion on the quarterback situation. So they have Tanner Mordecai, Jack Plummer, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson, which we all know none of these guys have been on a UFL roster as of yet. They've all been in the NFL up to this point. What are your thoughts on the quarterback room and then just overall the general roster so far as it's assembled?
I mean, I like it. It's, kind of like classic Beck. It's like you guys already touched on, a lot of tall physical receivers, a lot of tall, big tight ends. They're going to outmuscle you, a solid running back depth chart as well. And if I honestly had to guess, I would probably say, I'd probably say Plummer is probably the opening day starter.
Interesting.
I have a lot of faith in him. For some reason, it's just one of those gut feelings. I feel like he's going to be like the not the surprise, but just like the number one guy announced closer to the season.
That's fair. Travis, you were kind of shaking your head. Who do you think starts for them?
I mean, Dorian Thompson-Robinson obviously has the more NFL experience. He's played a lot more games there, and he was a fifth-round draft pick in his own right out of UCLA. I think the way Anthony Beck started leaning towards his offense that we saw with Manny Wilkins, he started running the ball with his quarterback a little bit more, and DTR can do that amazingly. Not saying Jack Plummer is not athletic, because he is more athletic than people give him credit for, but I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson is just going to add a lot more of depth to that offense in terms of his ability to extend the play and, hit some of these bigger wide receivers downfield as well.
Agreed. And I'm not sure why it's not showing up for some reason, but Michael Washington tuning in. And speaking of which, everybody, if you're watching, Michael Washington will be on future episodes. He's going to be another host of this show. He just was not able to make it this morning, but he says seeing who they replaced Beck with in St. Louis makes more sense for the Orlando move to him, which obviously, like I mentioned before, I questioned the move until I saw who they hired. So, very much a similar opinion. Travis, I'm with you, man. You hit the nail on the head again. Toward the end of last season, you saw St. Louis start to operate with a lot more quarterback run game. That's why you saw a guy like Max Duggan, end up being the starter down the stretch. He struggled passing, but still kept them in games because he was able to be so dangerous with his feet. So I think we're going to see a lot of that similar approach, at least early on in the season. So I think that's where Dorian Thompson-Robinson has the edge. But I do think we'll eventually see all three of these quarterbacks for this team, because I don't think that Beck is necessarily 100% sold on any one guy, right? These are all new quarterbacks to him. He hasn't seen any of them in person as of yet. So I think there could be a situation where we see all of these guys start games for the team. And honestly, this is going to sound a little optimistic, but I really like the formation of this quarterback room, because this is the type of talent that the UFL should be going after. Tanner Mordecai, former draft pick for the NFL, and now he's with the UFL. He spent, I think, one season with San Francisco, and then he was out of the league last year. Similar situation for Plummer. He spent some time with Carolina, then he was out of the league. So still young guys, 25, 26 range, that could go right back to the NFL with the right showing in the UFL. So this is the type of player that we've always been told was supposed to be in the UFL, but as of late, it had kind of gotten to the point where, not in a bad way, just prefacing that, but where it's been kind of an older player that we've seen like in multiple of these spring leagues over the years. So just was an interesting note that I have kind of noticed that we're leaning a little bit younger over this season. So any other notes or any other things you guys want to talk about with the Orlando Storm? All right, so moving on to the next team at hand. How about Travis's DC Defenders? You're a big Defenders fan in the past. I assume you're still rolling with them in the future?
Yes, I am. So I'll have to pick up a little bit of the slack because Michael Washington ain't here. He's our other resident DC Defenders fan, so I'll take charge here. I mean, I'm really happy with the players that we got to retain. Obviously sad that, we've lost Chris Rowland. We lost a couple other key contributors like Braylon Sanders. Pretty stoked that we still get Jordan Tiamu, Mike DeLillo, Spencer Sanders, Abram Smith, Deion Jackson. I think Ty Scott sticking around is a really big thing for us because, in my opinion, I think Ty Scott could be a top 5 receiver in this league. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but I think Ty Scott has all the talent. He has NFL size, NFL length. We saw what he could do last year until he ended up, I think he broke his forearm or broke his wrist. He was out for a big chunk of last year. But like I said, I think he has the potential to be a top 5 wide receiver in this league. We are able to keep some people on our offensive line, our defensive line. Derek Robertson coming back. He's one of our best edge rushers, so I'm happy we were able to keep him. We got 2 Penn State linebackers now. We got Brandon Smith and Curtis Jacobs. Brandon Smith was a 4th-round draft pick in 2022. So we're adding to our linebacker room. And then in terms of our DBs, it's hard not to talk about Luis Cine. He was obviously a 1st-round pick in 2022 by the Vikings. And then we have DeAndre Baker, who was a 1st-round pick in his own right, who played for us last year. And then, we got a couple other guys in that defensive back room that are going to be contributors. And then we were able to bring all of our specialists back as well. So I think DC is sitting in a good spot off the backs of winning a championship. And I'm happy about some of the players that we got to retain.
Absolutely. TJ, any glaring thoughts you want to get out about the DC Defenders? If not, I'll toss you another roster so we can kind of speed this up a bit.
I do want to talk about, their pair of tight ends, Mason Fairchild and Trey Berry. Man, they're both bigger, taller tight ends, 6'5" and 6'6". I think it kind of shows their mindset. They're going to keep the same kind of general offensive game plan that they had last year. The ability to air it out, but bread and butter is going to just be nickel dime moves down the field. So I really like that. And of course, you're getting your starting quarterback back, your defending champion quarterback back. So they're going to be a tough out. And, hey, they're the defending champs. So again, not to spoil the rankings, but hey, you got to list them number 1 because they're the champs. So
fair enough. And yeah, getting Jordan Teamu back and really that whole quarterback room was huge. So Travis, I'm going to do that every time we do the show. TJ, is there any team that you're kind of rocking with other than the Storm so far?
Yeah, we can go to the Louisville Kings.
Okay, perfect. So what are your thoughts on their roster so far as I pull it up here, and I'll actually put this one on the screen as we go.
I do like it. Not just from player wise, but also player personnel wise. Coaching. We touched on it earlier. They're bringing back a lot of former, not just players, but former Baltimore Ravens to the staff. And the one player that really caught my eye as a Steelers fan, or at least former Steelers fan after yesterday, not sure yet, would be Benny Snell. Former Steelers running back. And fun fact about him. His dad, it's in their bloodlines, man, to play in the spring. His dad played in NFL Europe and the original XFL. So, so there's that. And, with Kentucky, every season he had in college, over 1,000 yards rushing. But in my opinion, with Najee Harris and everything else going on there, he just never really got a fair shake to kind of really cement himself on the Steelers roster long term. Spent some time with the Lions as well, but now that he's in the UFL, man, I think he's going to have a good season for the Kings. I'm rooting for him.
Absolutely. You want to talk about a position of strength? Look at this tight end room. They have 5 different tight ends: Jalen Weidemeyer, Chris Pierce, Florian Bierbaumer. Actually, I believe he's an international player from Sweden, if I remember correctly. Irv Smith and Trey McKitty. A pretty strong position. But then you also have Lynn Bowden coming back, which I'm excited to see what he can do in this offense. Tariq Black, a couple other players on this list. But this is a strong roster from top to bottom. I'm excited to see what they can do. I also like this right here at the top. They drafted 3 centers. That 100% will come into play at some point this season, and they're going to look like geniuses if they carry all of those guys into the year. We're going to move on to Columbus Aviators. I'm going to take this one. I was kind of jokingly telling other guys that I am a Columbus Aviators fan this season, and it's partially because of their quarterback room. I'm a huge believer in Jalen Morton. I think that the way they constructed this quarterback room, to me, makes a lot of sense, because you bring in Jalen McClendon, you bring in Clayton Tune, you bring in Jalen Morton. They're all very similar players. They're all athletic, dual threat type guys. They can run, they can take a hit. They're bigger players. They're all 215 plus. So I think that lends itself to running an offense that's going to be a lot of that will have a lot of consistency, even if there's injuries at the position. They also have Toa Toa. Great move to bring him in. Tyreek McAllister was in the CFL for a little bit, briefly with the Raiders as well. Electric player in the return game. Great receiver out of the backfield as well. They drafted 4 or 5 running backs here, so keep an eye out for them to run the ball early and often, but also have a good mixture of, kind of speed and power with some of these guys that they brought in. Like the way that they built the defense, a lot of bigger, longer defensive backs. Really, really like the offensive line that they built. A lot of size. Again, lends itself to a strong running game this year. Spent a lot of draft picks on guys that are experienced in spring football when it comes to the offensive line. Ryan Nelson, Noah Atagi, Jawan Bushell-Beatty. Those are all guys that you want to build around on the offensive line. Elise Mack, another great pick that I liked. So, realistically, top to bottom, I'm a big fan of this roster. Kiki Chisholm, I think, is going to be a good pick as well. So, really not a ton of thoughts about any individual players that I didn't touch on there, but realistically, just a solid roster, top to bottom. Any thoughts from either of you guys on the Columbus Aviators roster?
The only thing I'll ask both of you, because I'm curious to see what you'll say, but if you're the Columbus Aviators, who's your starting quarterback?
I think I'd probably go with Jalen McClendon, at least out of the block. He played really well, down the stretch when he was given the opportunity to start. Has always kind of kicked around on a bench, never really had the chance to play a ton until like last season. So I think he's a guy with a lot of upside in my mind that, I think he could really be a guy who could have a breakout season if you just hand him the reins and let him go, personally. I would love to see Morton start. Obviously, that's kind of my guy, but I think that, he's probably a solid number 2, but realistically, let's be honest. Clayton Tune is, he's probably going to get a good chance. It's probably his job to lose going into the camp, unfortunately. But we'll see.
Yeah, I definitely think we're going to see, there's a chance we see all 3 of them play. But I think specifically Clayton Tune and McClendon we're going to see a lot of. And it wouldn't surprise me if, injuries happen or whatever it might be that, this team might bring on another quarterback, because we've seen that plenty of times in the past where people get a little banged up. Maybe they don't play great. And then we see, halfway through the season, some quarterbacks coming in off the street and stuff who have a, big name behind them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I would have liked to see come back, and I'm sure, Travis, you'll probably agree with me on this one, is Team 9. Given that they centralized the scouting, why not have, that practice squad you can pull guys from that are in shape, under contract, ready to go. But I get it because each coach is going to have a different taste for what they want player wise. So I guess it makes more sense to do it this way. But I'm going to kick this one over to you, Travis. Dallas Renegades. Back to the Dallas name, back to a little bit more of the sleeker look in the logo, and now with Rick Neuheisel at the helm. What are your thoughts on their roster so far?
I mean, they're obviously getting their leader back in Luis Perez. He's been in spring football for forever, it feels like. And then they got Austin Reed behind him out of Western Kentucky, who I believe led the NCAA a couple years back in passing yards. And I think he's a good talent. And then they got some other guys like Isaiah Spiller, who was a 4th-round pick from the Chargers in that running back room to go along with Day Hunter. They got some of their wide receivers back in Tyler Vaughns and Deontay Burnett. And then they brought some new guys in, and Denzel Mims and Miles Boykin. Miles spent some time with the Steelers as well. But they're a 2nd and a 3rd-round pick in their own rights. So they brought some big names into that wide receiver room. And then Peyton Hendershot in the tight end room is another NFL name who's bounced around the league a little bit. And then they're getting Taco Charlton back, Donald Payne back, Willie Taylor. They're getting a lot of their key contributors, John A. Harris. They're getting a lot of their key contributors on defense back. And I think TJ said it earlier, it's hard not to, look at the retention that they have and the staff that they have and not say that this is a playoff team.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair for sure. I really like how they assemble their wide receiver room. A lot of different bodies there that can do a lot of different things. I'm a big Seth Green fan as well. What he did for the team last year, I think, was fun to watch, and he should be a talented player. TJ, any thoughts on the Renegades before we move on?
No, I was going to say, yes, Seth Green becoming the fan favorite there. And also, kind of like Travis touched on quick, Miles Boykin, former Ravens Steeler, spent some time with other teams as a preseason or practice squad guy. Once upon a time was a top 100 pick, 93rd overall pick. I'm interested to see how he does. And, best season collegiately, almost hit 1,000 yards. So he definitely has that ability in him when he's given the opportunities on the field. So let's see if he gets them here in the UFL.
Absolutely. So moving on to the Birmingham Stallions, I was actually interested to see how this roster was constructed because obviously you have a complete turnover in the coaching staff. You never know how they're going to view the old roster despite the success. So I was interested to see which players they retain, which players they let go. And I think there's a really interesting mix of guys on this roster. A lot of Battle Hawks that have moved over, which I thought was kind of interesting as well. But it really, some of the guys that they prioritize make sense. Bringing back Matt Corral, obviously he's from Ole Miss. Has the ties to the South there. Also has ties to the Stallions and the offensive coordinator they just brought in, Tizino, great linebacker that they were able to retain. Colby Wadman, about probably the best punter in the league. Deontay Brown, solid guard who they retained. The quarterbacks that they brought in around Corral, I think, are interesting. Jaron Hall, previously with the Minnesota Vikings, was a draft pick. I think he's a guy that could be a bounce back to the NFL pretty quickly if he ends up getting a chance to start. Taylor Elgersma is a Canadian national player that has been coveted by the CFL, but has not given them a chance yet. He is all in on the NFL. He's getting a lot of looks as of late, and he's really hoping he can catch on again. But this is a guy who had never played Americanized football until last season when he signed with the Packers. He went to college in Canada, start to finish with Wilford Lawyer, and he's a very interesting prospect in the UFL because obviously he's a direct nod at the fact that this is a better pathway to the NFL than the CFL is. So just kind of an interesting fact there that I thought stuck out. Couple different players on here that that I also stuck out to me over Omar Jarvis. That dude's a great safety. He's a rookie. Probably not a ton of people out there that know a bunch about him. I'm not sure if he's going to start, but I expect him to be a very talented depth player that plays a pretty large role. Tight end, they only picked 2 players. It's kind of interesting to see. Dawood Davis is back. Marcus Sims, Deion Kane, Laviska Shenault is a great pick. And then also my guy Cam Eccles-Looper here rounds out the wide receiver group. I like the team. Interesting construction. Would love to see Taylor Elgersma get a chance to start in the UFL. And it'll be interesting to see if he's actually on the roster come day one. Last roster to discuss, and I'll let you guys kind of take the reins on this one. Whoever wants to take the lead is fine with me, is the Houston Gamblers. So anyone have some strong thoughts about the Gamblers you guys want to express?
I'll shout out 1 or 2 players here. So, of course, we lost Braylon Sanders from the DC Defenders down to Houston. I think that he's going to be a good role player for them. And another player that I want to shout out is the former Delaware running back Marcus Yarns. Went undrafted in 2025, spent a little bit of time with the Saints, and he ends up in this league. And I think he's a guy who hopefully he's got a lot of experience in terms of the running backs who are probably going to be ahead of him in like Nate McRae and Kirk Menkert. They're both going to get a lot of reps, but I hope Yarns gets in and, get some eyeballs on him to maybe use this as a pathway back to the NFL, because I do think he has NFL talent, even though he went undrafted out of Delaware.
Great points for sure. You actually highlighted some players I was not expecting, which is awesome. A couple great players that they've brought in that I thought rounded out a pretty solid offensive line. Cam Carter was a pretty solid quarterback or offensive tackle in the UFL previously. Kirk Merritt's a really interesting player. Markel Roby. But I'll kick it over to you, TJ. Who sticks out to you on this roster?
I got to give a shout out to a hometown hero from Philly, PA, man, Shaka Tony, defensive end, went to Penn State. Big guy, 6'3", 231. I think he's gonna do really good given opportunities.
All right, so we'll go ahead and move on from the roster breakdown and look at the schedule. Go ahead and give me a second to get that pulled up, and we'll go ahead and break down some of the games. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this. Obviously, we've already been here for about an hour. So if you stuck with us, you're just now catching on. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. If you haven't done so already, hit that like button. Also, if you haven't done so, jump over to the YouTube channel. Help us hit 3,500 subscribers. We're on our way there. We need your help to do so. So get over there, subscribe, completely free. Does not cost you a dime, and all it does is help us continue to grow and bring more viewers to this great program we just launched. So let me find the schedule, because currently is not on the website, I see. So give me just a second. There were some notes that we noticed about the UFL schedule that I wanted to kind of bring up. We talked about it in our group chat heavily, that there were a lot of back-to-back games, games where the same teams play each other twice in a row, once away, once home. So I wanted to ask you guys, we kind of speculated on this in the group chat. And again, this is speculation. This isn't any facts. So if anybody's watching this, we do not know what the ultimate goal is here by the league. We just can only go off of what we see and what we're kind of putting 2 and 2 together here. But we discussed the potential that maybe they're going to put teams in the markets a lot more, at least during the game weeks and stuff. Maybe they leave the team in the city, up until they travel back to the other city. I'm not sure how they're all going to do that, but it just appears how some of these games are stacked. It would make sense that that's part of the plan here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the schedule, but let's go ahead and just discuss that thought. What do you guys think overall would be the gain from doing that, other than, the obvious travel perks if you are in those markets?
I mean, having games back to back could also increase the intensity of the second matchup, especially if the first one's already a little chippy. Uh, especially if they're already kind of like a
No
little
call.
rivalry going on.
Agreed. Sorry about that. What games?
We all know Birmingham and Orlando is going to be a good matchup.
Columbus and Orlando?
Birmingham.
Oh, Birmingham. Sorry. Which week are you looking at?
Oh, I didn't see him. I think they go week 6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, week 6. I know they face each other.
There you go. Okay.
Then,
Travis, sorry.
4 as well.
Finish your thought, TJ. I apologize.
No big. Yeah, I think week 4 they also face each other, so they kind of have a against each other break, against each other again stretch.
There you go. Travis, what are some games that stuck out to you on the schedule?
There's a bunch of games that stick out because I think there's going to be a lot of good matchups. Week 1, Birmingham and Louisville opening up. That's that's really going to be kind of just a benchmark for the league. It's 2 first-year head coaches kicking off the league year, and I think that's surprising that that's the decision that they went with, because you think that they would go with, try to make it 2 established teams. But I believe that's who's kicking off. I can't see what the times are, but I believe that's who's starting off the league year. And you think it should have been like DC and St. Louis, because it's, 2 franchises who are, pretty cemented. But I think week 1, that's going to be a very interesting matchup, and that's going to really tell a story of how this Louisville team and how this Birmingham team is going to look. And then another small shout out on the schedule. DC plays back-to-back teams 3 different times. I think their last however many weeks of the season, they play a team back-to-back, and then they play another team back-to-back, and then they play another team back-to-back. So that's a little interesting on the on the part of the UFL to make the schedule that way. I think in terms of scouting report and in terms of the matchups, we're going to see a lot of these teams scouting specifically for each other, maybe changing up game plans for week 2, like TJ touched on a little bit. So, we're going to see how it works out for them. Maybe they continue to schedule this way, and maybe they don't. And like you said, maybe it gives them more of a presence in that market.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of my question. Like, what are you doing with players in between the games? Are they staying in the market? Are you traveling back to Arlington just to turn around and fly somewhere else? Some of the way they've structured this, it would make sense if they just left both teams in a market and then flew them out to the other market and then stayed in a week there or something. But it'll be interesting to see how they approach all that. Obviously, there seems to be a lot more local focus in the UFL now. So obviously that's a good move. I think that's something that they've been lacking over the past couple of years. So let's hope it pays off in attendance-wise. I did want to circle back, just correct one thing. The DC St. Louis game is the kickoff game at 12 p.m. Eastern. And then you have Houston and Dallas next at 4 p.m. And then you have Birmingham and Louisville at 8 p.m. Eastern on the 27th. Or sorry, no. I retract my correction. They're on the 27th. It's 12 p.m. on the 28th. I apologize. So disregard what I just said completely. All right. So any final thoughts?
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The something else about the back-to-back games too is from the standpoint of garnering attention and everything is going to be the gambling and betting aspect. Because how many times, like back-to-back games, like in other sports, like baseball, stuff like that, it's a totally different outcome. Or if it was a high-scoring game the first time, now the defensive, efforts are stronger. So that could really play a role too.
You have a good point. And honestly, it'd probably be fun to track like how those matchups go in terms of who wins and who loses. If it's a situation where you can basically bet on the home team winning each time, maybe that's something the bettors are following along with and trying to keep track of. So it'll be interesting to kind of track that as we go along this year. But obviously, not anywhere near to the point where we're going to ask for predictions or anything yet. So we'll get to betting odds, predictions, closer breakdowns of games as the season comes up closer. Just wanted to let you guys know this will be a weekly show as we get into the season. As of right now, we're probably just going to do some update episodes. We'll probably do maybe one more before the season starts, and then do probably a startup episode the week before the season kicks off or something like that. So stick with us. It's going to be a Sunday morning thing, kind of a pregame type thing for the Sunday games. We'll be able to break down the previous days games for Saturday and Friday night games when there are some. So stick with us. If you like this show and you have suggestions or anything of the sort, feel free to email us, message us on any social media, wherever you're watching right now. We'd be happy to take any sort of suggestions you guys want to see from the show. And then also support the companies, as mentioned before, that support us. We've got many great sponsors on the network that make this all happen for a lot cheaper and has kept us running. So if you want to continue to support Shady Sports, that's the best way to do it. Use the companies that support us. I would never ask directly for your money unless, of course, you're buying Shady Sports Network merch, which you can get at brandingblanks.com. On that note, TJ, Travis, any final thoughts before we get out of here for the day?
I don't think so. I'm just excited for the league.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I can see that there are going to be some times where there are going to be few words here. But it'll be a lot of fun. I think this is going to be a great dynamic from the group that we've got hosting the show. Obviously, like I said before, I've hosted a ton of shows with TJ at this point. We host our Saturday morning show every week together. Michael Washington and I do a CFL show in during their season, normally on Sunday mornings. So we're kind of transitioning over to this. And then Travis and I have worked together for years. So really excited about this show in particular. I think we're going to have a great dynamic on here, and a lot of good takes too, so if you're really looking for some informed takes, outside of when myself says stupid stuff, definitely join us and continue to follow along with this episode and so much more that we got going on in Shady Sports. But on that note, we'll catch you guys not next Sunday, but in a couple weeks when we have some more information coming out. Have a great Sunday. Have a great weekend. And hit that like button if you haven't done so already.
I'm a game changer.